Thank you for joining us. This is live with Miami's Community News, and I'm Michael Miller. Our guest today is there Dr. Anton Bonci. Did we
Yes.
get it right?
Yes, you did, Michael. Thank
Oh
you for
my
inviting
goodness,
me.
folks! Thank you, Bill. I was practicing all morning. So let's talk about a couple things. Right now, you're an MD and you're a scientist. So
Yes.
we're approaching this from a scientific point.
Yes.
Okay, let's look at the the holiday season, which we are right in the middle of. Historically, it starts around Thanksgiving, I think, and maybe till the first or second week of January. And for the rest of us, maybe a whole lot longer. There's certain things that happen to the psyche during this time of the year where families are together, or in some cases from COVID, maybe they're not together. Maybe this is the first time that families have been together without the loved ones they've lost, which is that children are without some parents or providers, maybe sisters and brothers and parents that are missing. So there's certain things that happen to us, and lots of people are unaware that there may be triggers that can cause certain responses. Can we talk about some
Yes.
of those triggers?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
And
Andres, can you put those up on the board over there?
absolutely. You are perfectly correct, Michael. Holidays are a very particular, very intense, beautiful, and yet stressful time for all of us. It doesn't matter what type of holiday we celebrate. Let's make sure that, first of all, everybody's on board with what we mean by a trigger. A trigger is something, it could be a person, it could be a situation, it could be an environment that is somehow making us uncomfortable. It's somehow bringing back some stressful memories for us. There is a science behind understanding what triggers are. There are brain regions, for example. One of them is called the amygdala, which is a very important brain region when we feel stressed out by something. And these triggers are typical for most of us because we have during the holidays situations that remember us maybe past difficult moments. So we, sorry, go ahead.
So let's talk about music. Music could be a
Yes,
trigger to things uncomfortable or very positive things.
absolutely yes, because our brain learns first of all very quickly. For example, if a music remembers me the time that one of my relatives passed away, or whether a music reminds me of the moment where I proposed to someone, or whether I was with family in a beautiful, peaceful dinner, this same music can have completely opposite meanings for two different people. And it's coded in a form of a brain memory. Whether, as you said, Michael, it's a positive memory if this music is associated with some beautiful memories, or a negative memory, these are cues and these are triggers in a sense, but negative memories last usually a very, very long time, even stronger in many people than positive memories.
So here we are. So yeah, the holidays can trigger things. And what is it? Where does it takes people back to some point in years prior to either happiness or not so happy.
Yes,
And the purpose of today is talk about those triggers that get us uncomfortable.
yes. So there are brain regions. One of them is called the hippocampus, for example, that codes for memories. Another one is a brain region that actually releases chemicals. One of these is dopamine that makes us pay attention to something that is important to us. There is this amygdala brain region, especially associated with traumatic memories or negative memories. So we, and the most important point, because we really want to send a message of hope, we need to know what our triggers are. Once we identify them, once we know exactly what is it that is triggering us, is causing us stress, anxiety, or for example, even in the case of addictions, craving for substances, we can come up with strategies, whether it's with a therapist, whether it's with our support network, to avoid those triggers, to minimize the effects that those triggers can have on our well-being
Okay, so
during the holidays.
yeah, and you're the executive chairman and founder of GIA Miami,
Yes,
and your team made up of scientists and other folks,
clinicians,
clinicians,
therapists. We have a
can
lot of therapists as
can
well.
help folks get through this. All right.
Absolutely,
The
yes.
the part that's intriguing to me is that the parts of the brain frequently act autonomously from what we think we want. So it's like we step on the gas. Well, you know what's going to happen, but did you know that you stepped on the gas, right? And I think that when people can have a better understanding how the brain works, that they won't be so self-deprecating with that and blame themselves rather than this is part of the brain that's functioning. One of the things we know, lots of times when people have strokes, they can't talk, but they can sing. How is that possible that that works like that?
It is. So let me go back to, let me answer one question at a time. You said something very, very important, that within our brain, I want to paraphrase what you said. We have many, many different brain regions, right? So some brain regions are coding for very obvious behaviors. I'm speaking right now. You can see me speaking. Some brain regions do not have a voice. Some brain regions are more coding unconscious memories or behaviors that I don't see. For example, if I take drugs, okay, I make changes in a system of brain regions. This is called the emotional, the limbic system. And many of these brain regions that are changed, for example, by exposure to drugs, or if I have an addiction, many of these brain regions don't speak openly. They are sitting there in our brain. They are changed by drugs, and altogether somehow they change my behaviors, but not in a way that I sometimes am conscious about. And this is a very important point because it gets to a point that is crucial in 2021. We know that situations where we now have behaviors that are hurting us are not because we mean it. As you said before, unconscious behaviors can drive. Addictions are a beautiful example. Anxiety, depression. These conditions, which are not a choice, this is a very important point, but these are diseases that we can help and we can treat. These conditions shape our lives, and sometimes, in many of us, take control of our life. But something very sneaky about these diseases is that they make us think that it's our fault. And that is absolutely not the case. It is as if I told you, I have diabetes, I have hypertension, or I have cancer. It's my fault. These are diseases, brain diseases like everything else. And it's very sad that there is so much stigma still in 2021 to even admit, I am anxious, I am depressed, and he said, I have an addiction. Because I wouldn't hesitate to tell you, I have a heart problem. I need,
And that's it's a terrible thing because I think it keeps people away from talking to whoever they're talking to,
Correct.
so that they can go get help. If you had a
Correct.
problem with your knee, all right,
Yes.
you would go to the physical therapist. You would go to a surgeon. They would look
Yes.
at it. If you needed a problem, you could go and take it. Then you go to
Yes.
therapy and you get better.
Yes.
So with this, the addiction, whether it's to drugs or alcohol or sex, or
Gambling, internet,
internet,
video games.
or video games. When my son was about 15 years old, he wouldn't go out. He was always playing on a computer. One day I got flipped out. I took all the computers, I threw it on the ground. My shrink at the time said, no, that's his place where he goes. Who knew that 20 years later he'd be making his living on the computer?
Right.
But the way I looked at it was I wanted him to go do something else.
Yeah. Yes.
But in today's environment with Twitter and with TikTok and with Facebook, we all spend as a community at large throughout the universe, 7 billion people are hooked up to many of these social medias, a huge amount of time. And I know a lot of us, and I include that, spend way too much time that's there. But the reinforcement of feeling good, I get all the time. I was fortunate never to do drugs, right? But I can imagine that it's a similar sort of high from that.
Yes.
So when people do cocaine, it changes parts of their brain.
Absolutely.
And the reason they were doing it and continue to doing it is because maybe they experimented with it at first, all right? And then they get moved to this next step of this addiction. So with your facility, GIA downtown, you're about 15th Street in Biscayne,
Correct.
right? A wonderful place, and see all the changes that are going on there. I have a friend that lives at Museum Tower right down the street from there. Wonderful view, a lot of people, all right? Great place to move. There are tens of thousands of people living there. if somebody wants to visit you, what are some of the things that they could talk to you and your team about, and what would they see?
So that's a great question, Michael. The first thing is that we are really big on information. I mean, we are living a time where somebody starts a random rumor, gossip, something, and because of social media, because of media, it becomes an instantaneous truth. We offer free, and I repeat, free education, information seeking interviews with my medical team. I meet with anybody who wants to talk science, who wants to know more about how does my brain work if I do X, what happens to my brain. This information seeking is one of the foundations of our clinic. We don't want people first to come and pay and then find out what we can offer. But I really, it's one of my obsessions is to offer information about what science, what medicine, what psychology, what brain stimulation, this phenomenal technology that everybody should know about called transcranial magnetic stimulation can do for them. Because guys, thank God, it's 2021. And it's very sad, Michael. I want to add one piece of data that 1 in 7 Americans, as we speak, are aware that in 2021, there are very effective treatments for addictions, as you mentioned, for anxiety, for depression. 1 in 7 Americans. Doesn't even matter how educated they are. So free information, they can call, they can ask to have a meeting with me, and I chat with everyone, whether they're homeless or billionaires. I just want to share my
when
knowledge
people
with everyone.
can approach it from a lot of different areas, the emotional part, but the intellectual part, they can just have that conversation. It certainly puts a lot of us at ease when we go to do something. And I'm a very curious guy. So, okay, this is how it works. You do this, you do this next step. MRIs are a perfect example. Let's take a look. You can't walk, you got to, let's take a look at what's going on there. And once they get all that information about how it happened, this is what it looks like, then we can help. So there are lots of people that are, I wish I could read that, but I can't. All right, hold on 1 second. All right, we're getting some messages from off screen. All right, so once you have this conversation with people, that you're able to put together a plan working with them and talk
Correct.
to figure out what the problem, how long they've had the problem, if they're really motivated to do something about it.
And we tell them basically person by person, because as you know, each one of us is a universe. I can make a random example. I suffer from anxiety. I suffer from depression. I sit down with one members of our medical team, and I get an understanding. Okay, we could offer you, I'm making it up, Michael, therapy with a therapist. Would you be a candidate to see a psychiatrist or a neurologist? Maybe you need medications as well beside therapy. And would you be a candidate for transcranial magnetic stimulation, for this technology that has been around since 1985 for the treatment of medication-resistant depression? And since 1985, thanks to the work of many, many clinicians worldwide and scientists, have developed into a tool, a phenomenal therapeutic tool for additional conditions, from OCD to smoking cessation to types of addictions and PTSD and
So frequently
anxieties.
people go to you after they've tried these other methods. It's many times it's progressive, right?
Correct.
They try this, and they
Correct.
go, what hope do I have? And you say, we have this other thing that's over here. Do some patients walk, they say, I want to skip all this stuff here. I'm just ready. All right. And then they go, and then you talk to them about this treatment.
We try to discourage that. We see that a lot of times, as much as this TMS, this transcranial magnetic stimulation, is really extremely useful and effective for anxiety, depression, addictions, most of us need also a very clear psychological or therapy support to really dig at the same time as the machine can help us with symptoms of anxiety, panic attacks, depression, addiction. We need somebody to get at the root of our problems, like a strategic behavioral consultant, as I like to call them. So we tend to not just want to buzz somebody,
Yes.
because that's not the solution alone. The solution, I really believe, in 2021 is to take advantage of psychology, of medications, of therapy, of TMS, everything together. Lifestyle is another very important component. Meditation, mindfulness, spirituality, which doesn't mean religion. So the trick is not to say, hey, I have the new snake oil, it's called TMS, it's going to solve all your problems by tomorrow. It doesn't work like that.
So getting back to, if you have a problem walking, you go to somebody and they look at each of the steps. And in the conservative world that I like to be in, you try this over here and this over here, and you keep moving along and see any progress you make. So it always reserves this over here, that you can always go there. And maybe you don't need that other thing. Maybe going to, in the case of a knee, maybe going to the physical therapist, maybe it's working out 3 days a week, maybe it's losing weight, maybe it's eating food better, taking some anti-inflammatories. So your message is loud and clear. We don't want you to go from over here to here, because you need to justify doing that.
Correct.
But let's say somebody goes to it and they've done all the things you've asked them to do, whatever it happens to be, and it's not quite working right. And then in consult with you, and you agreed that it would be something for them. Explain how and why why it works so often.
This is a very different machine in terms of what it does compared to a medication. Let me use an example of an antidepressant. Most antidepressants work by blocking what is called the serotonin transporter, and they increase the levels in our brain of serotonin. Making a simple example. What this machine does, as far as we know, as of now, based on the scientific evidence, it has 4 main effects. One effect is a neurochemical effect. And what I mean for that is that when we do this brain stimulation, by the way, I do it almost every week because I've been using it for insomnia for a very long time. So first of all, a neurochemical effect, it releases our own chemicals, dopamine, serotonin, growth factors, endocannabinoids, endorphins, and the list goes on and on. So it has a very clear chemical effect. It releases our own brain medications, so to speak, and our own chemicals. The second effect is a brain plasticity effect. It does produce, this is also based on evidence, it does produce new brain connections, and we can measure that with certain machines like evoked motor potentials and whatnot. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. This is a very interesting effect that we didn't expect, but some scientists have provided evidence for that. So you may also know, many people may not know that anxiety, depression, and addictions sometimes have also an inflammation component. There is inflammation in the bodies and in the brain of these people. And it has also, as a fourth effect, it does increase brain blood flow. So it brings more blood and oxygen to our brain. We don't know, scientists don't know yet, if there are more effects produced by this electromagnetic field. This is not electroshock, by all means, is not invasive. And science is keeping on studying. Many of my colleagues are keeping on studying the effects of TMS and are keeping on trying to find new indications for this technology.
We know if you go to physical therapists, many times they use different devices to improve circulation, reduce swelling, right? And to cause the muscles to twitch, if that's the word, right? To massage that. So it's similar in nature in the sense that it's going to cause things to happen that you couldn't really do without that. Have that right?
Yes, you can. This is a very interesting point. There is evidence also that certain types of therapy, they do produce brain plasticity. Yoga, real good exercise, it does produce very positive and useful releases of chemicals. Good exercise is actually a way, as many colleagues say, to turn on your endogenous pharmacy, right? So it does what also really good therapy can do for us, or really well-tuned for each one of us physical activity. But it does it in a more structured way, in a more scientifically controlled way, in a sense. But they all feed onto each other toward the same purpose.
These treatments, it's non-invasive,
it's not
right?
invasive.
And more or less, how long is that treatment?
So this is a very, very important point. The treatment, the protocols of stimulation per se, for example, the one that I do for my insomnia, can last between 12 minutes and 20 minutes. So I just sit there, I fall asleep. There are videos that we have done about it. And but the most important point is this, Michael. People usually struggle with whether it's anxiety, depression, or addiction, or post-COVID fatigue for months or years. So this brain stimulation technology can give relief to those symptoms even within a few days. You can begin to see improvements even within a few days. We have seen this with many patients, both in Europe and here. But if I stopped doing TMS within a day, 2, 3, 5, I promise you, my beneficial effects of TMS would vanish fairly quickly. So what I'm trying to say is that it takes commitment. We have seen that in our experience, at least a minimum of 4 weeks, meaning once a day for 5 weeks, Monday through Friday, for 4 weeks, sorry, Monday through Friday is the minimum amount of stimulations that can make my beneficial effects last for months, for weeks, for, again, depends on the person. And after those 20 initial sessions, what the medical team does is comes up patient by patient, client by client, with a personalized maintenance program. And I can make a simple example. Now, I'm not anxious anymore. I go back to my family. I love my job. I'm happy. Everything is great. Maybe I will need TMS once every few weeks, just as a recall, as a or I'm Anto, but a different Anto. I feel much better, but I hate my job. I'm in a very stressful environment.
Except I know now that I hate it.
I'm fighting with my significant other nonstop, and I am in a horrible financial situation. Maybe even if I'm seeing improvements, if I'm seeing that I'm going back to being myself, close to my 100%, maybe I will need TMS once a week, maybe more. So we follow the progress of the patient as opposed to try to fit
Right.
a square into a peg. No, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Trying to fit everybody into the same. Every one of us is different.
So Dr. Bonci, let's talk about the effects of COVID that it's had on families and on each of us, on our work, on our schools. Everybody in the universe has had something going on with them. We interpret it differently, but everybody certainly has been affected one way or another. So tell us about when people are having challenges with COVID and what it has done, including the stress that can go on. What are some options for them?
All right. So, well, COVID has been a disaster for a lot of us. For all of us, you know, my father died in one of the worst times in Italy of COVID. I couldn't even go to the funeral. My family forbid me to fly to Italy. So it was horrible for so many of us, so many families. It has created also this social isolation, which a lot of us have suffered from, on top of this anxiety of uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about how long is it going to last. Because one thing about a stressor, Michael, that is very important, if I know that whatever is stressing me out is going to last X amount of time, doesn't make it easy, but at least I know that it's going to end. But as you're seeing now with the Omicron variant, and some people are very concerned about it, it's a state of uncertainty, of no end in sight, no clear end in sight, that based on, again, numbers, facts, statistics, the statistics about addiction, anxiety, depression, suicide rates, and whatnot, they have all increased very, very significantly. So it has affected all of us in a major way. There was a beautiful study published just a few weeks ago in Lancet Psychiatry that collected 236,000 patients who had COVID. And they measured the incidence of psychiatric, neurological conditions. And basically, very long story short, 35-ish% of these patients, not all of them were hospitalized, about half of them, if I remember correctly, had consequences in terms of anxiety, depression, even dementias, Parkinson's disease. And so COVID has affected in many, many ways, even from a real medical point of view. As you know, one of the mechanisms of action of COVID is to damage some blood vessels, whether they're in the brain or in our lungs or in our heart. And that is one of the reasons why we think, scientists, clinicians think, that COVID is having a long-lasting effect. This study followed these patients for 6 months. It's an amazing group in Oxford by Dr. Paul Harrison.
So I just got a signal. We're going to ask for an extra 5 minutes so we can cover some things that are important. Can we go back to Andres and put up the 10 top tips how to prioritize mental health wellness, including, doctor, if you could fit in here the exposure to the news about COVID, what that does to us, and maybe we can move some of those triggers around a little bit. So why don't we go ahead and talk about some of those things?
Absolutely. So I want to use Omicron as the perfect example. We know as of now, and there was a quote from a scientist that just saw a couple of days ago in the Washington Post that said, let's stay calm. Let's just see the data first. There is a lot of panic around Omicron, but we still don't have any clear evidence on why we should panic. If we are vaccinated, we know that we have a very strong immune response, most of us, against COVID, against Delta, against Omicron. It is true that Omicron, as far as I read, is infectious, but there is no evidence that anybody has to panic. There's no evidence, period. So the flu has been with us for more than 100 years, right? And we live with the flu. COVID, like the flu virus, will keep on mutating. This is what viruses do. Some are smarter, faster than others. But again, I believe in science. I believe in Dr. Fauci. I believe in get your vaccines, get vaccinated. Just be mindful of following healthy procedures. We also know, I want to mention one thing about this study as well, that the categories at risk, at higher risks in this study that I mentioned before about the COVID, consequences of COVID in our mental wellness, these groups were suffering from hypertension, from diabetes. So try to take care of your health. Try to stay healthy on everything else that you need to take care of, because that will make you stronger against COVID. And please get vaccinated, as we all did.
And when you talk about the scientific part of it, there's something calming about that. Instead of being emotionally driven, you go, wait a second, let's just watch this and see what happens. It puts a pause on it, and it takes away it's not near hysteria, but all right,
Yeah.
but it could be, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the science of it, it certainly calms it down a bit. So let's talk about some of the other things up here.
Yes.
If you want to talk about a little bit about number 4, which is remembering your dreams for the
Absolutely.
future.
That's a very good point. Holidays will pass. We are all going to have, hopefully, a wonderful time, but all of us have a long-term plan. We know what we love to do. We know where we want to head with our dreams, with our passions, with our sense of purpose. And we shouldn't forget that holidays are just a very minor drop in an ocean that hopefully is a big ocean of all of our lives. So let's be forgiving toward ourselves, toward all our relatives and friends that are probably going through the same. Travel, stressful, who's going to organize dinner and that and that. Let's remember our limits, because we are not God. We have weaknesses, and we know when sometimes it's time to stop. We know when it's time to stop drinking. We know what's best for us. So let's keep it very simple. Let's go back to looking inward, looking at what we know about ourselves, what is making us stronger, who are the people in our group, in our tribe that we can really rely on, and let's rely on them. Never be ashamed of asking for help, on talking with us. Let's remember that I, for example, I can only drink half a glass of wine, otherwise I fall asleep. I know my limits. I'm weak. Fine. That's how I am. There's nothing wrong with that. So let's remember that we are going to get through this. Science is working non-stop to get better and better and better vaccines. Omicron will be just another blip into this variant that will keep on coming, like the influenza virus will keep on changing. Let's remember that holidays are an incredible opportunity to spend time with people that we love. And let's not try to make them perfect. This is just my stupid advice. Let's try to make them human, with our limits, with our weaknesses, with our strength. Let's be human. Let's not expect perfection from us, from others, and I think it's just going to be fun.
Part of it is that I know that we need to check in with each other and see how we're doing. I have this short story. I used to run a lot. I was running a marathon with a friend of mine, and he says, "How you doing?" I said, "For the first time ever, 20 years running," I said, "I'm not doing well." And as I said that, I realized how much I must have been hurting to say that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a macho thing. I was holding on to a fence, and I could see the fire rescue truck up the road. And he said, "Come here." So we sit down, and he sat with me for a half an hour. And then we finished the race together. Go forward 10 years to a few months ago, I call him. I go, "How you doing?" He says, "Not good." He says, "I have COVID. I'm 73. Michael, it's the disease of loneliness. He says, "You go in the hospital, you may never see your family again. And now I'm afraid I'm going to give it to my wife and my children." So I reminded him of the story of running and where he sat with me. And so I probably communicated with about 30 times over the next week about being there for him, and because it was the right thing to do. But I understood for me personally how much it meant when he sat with me there. And so I sat with him, and that we're not joking about it yet, but we're almost to that point to where we realize that we do have to check in with each other and to be able to be strong enough to recognize I'm not feeling right, I'm feeling a little weak, or I had too much to drink, or whatever it happens to be, or I need help, with that. So we understand that these triggers and that story, whenever I think about that story, I get tearful every time, because the connection that we made at that moment, which was really 10 years in the works, all right? And it's okay to feel close to people and to be able to express that. But let's, if we could, talk about some of the other triggers that might happen. The numbers, 5 was draw your boundaries. And you mentioned about,
Yes.
I know I can do a half a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. I have a terrible reaction to booze. Thank goodness. All right. Because I know, don't do it. All right. It's not like a decision. I haven't smoked pot in about 40 years. I'm going, thank goodness, because I don't like that. All right. But to understand your boundaries. But people that don't have those boundaries, right, they wind up having some problems.
That has to do with our own boundaries in terms of what we can tolerate physically as a human being. But boundaries also, and I want to mention this, Michael, thank you for asking, is learning one of the most difficult words, to just say no. No, I'm sorry. I cannot be in 10 different places at the same time. Because we tend to overstretch ourselves to try to please all the people that we care about sometimes, and then there's nothing left. It's like a piece of fabric that you stretch, but at some point it doesn't reach anywhere. So boundaries is also to say, no, I'm sorry, I cannot be everywhere, I cannot do everything, I can only choose certain activities with family, with friends, and it's okay to say no sometimes.
And when you're able to do that, the stress is less. Your
Yes.
inflammation stays a little bit further down. Your brain doesn't go, I need something to eat, drink, or whatever it happens to be, all right? Or go, to to the internet and to play around. We have 5 minutes left, even though I got the sign for 1 minute. All right. Let's number 7 was tap your support network. All right.
Yes. That has to. Sorry. No, go ahead.
So let's talk about that in the brief time we have left.
Look, whether you have a therapist, whether you have a circle of friends that you really trust, do not be ashamed. I love to, whenever I was giving talks in front of students, I love to start from my struggles. And I want to make a very simple example. sometimes you see people like us, right? MNMT, etc., etc. And people have this distorted concept that we had it easy. But the one thing that I tell everyone is that I struggled. I struggled from when I had to study nonstop in medical school because I needed to remember so many things, and it was a struggle. I struggled as a child because I was stuttering very heavily, and it was horrible for me. I felt so embarrassed and ashamed. I struggled my entire life because I was torn between having my family in another country, which is Italy, but wanted to live in this land of dreams and opportunities. Life is not easy. And I love to share my struggles, my mistake. I make mistakes every day. I made a lot of stupid mistakes I regret, but I get up every morning. I brush it. I try to learn whatever my stupid mistake of the day was or the year, and I try to be a better person every day. It's normal. And I have a support network of friends, of family in Italy that constantly said, Anto, come on, let's keep on going. So I am not able to do it alone, Michael. I have friends and I have help. And I'm not ashamed of admitting it.
And I think, part of that whole whole thing is being able to share that,
Yes.
not worry about how somebody might be able to look at that and go, oh, they're not good, or whatever it happens to be. But that's really sharing you as a human being,
Yeah.
and that I'm a regular person, right?
Yes.
Just so happens this is some of the things that we're doing. In our time that's left, I know we still have a couple things to go, but let's do number 10, and then we're going to talk about the GIA's facility. So let's talk about number 10. Very
Yeah.
important.
It's exactly, Michael, what you and I were mentioning before. The word forgive is crucial. Forgive yourself for not being perfect, being everywhere, pleasing everybody, chatting with everybody, and forgive others. Let's try to forgive each other more. Everybody's going through this horrible COVID, post-COVID confusion. Let's use the word, but in a meaningful way, forgiveness more, because as you were just saying a second ago, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect, and if you accept your own limits, perhaps you, and if you can forgive yourself, which usually is the most difficult thing to do, it's much easier to forgive others than to forgive ourselves. But if we forgive others and we forgive ourselves for what we cannot be sometimes, it's going to make the holidays easier for everyone.
So, and thank you for that, because we can all do more of that. And we know that it makes us feel better, and physically we feel better with that. And then inflammation goes down. You're cheerful. Your endorphins, if you're lucky, kick in. Right? We'll eat less, exercise more. What else we're going to be doing? And smiling a whole lot more.
Oh, yes.
So let's talk about GIA Miami and your facility. We've got a couple minutes. You want to talk about your team and how people can find out a little bit more about you and your team?
Absolutely. We have an amazing website. It's called GIA Miami, GIA.Miami. The medical team, the team of therapists, psychologists, we have some of the best. We handpicked everyone. There is a culture. There is a DNA at GIA and Vita Recovery, which are our sister clinic for people that need more intense treatments in terms of addiction. The DNA is compassion, professionality, love for what we do, unrushed. We are really trying to build a concept where everybody that comes in, actually, if you come to the clinic, it doesn't even look like a clinic. It looks like an art gallery, as somebody said, like as Bill was saying before. So it's a DNA of respect for others, understanding that we all struggle, the owners, everybody else. And we have that in common. Nobody's rushing. It's not a factory. It looks like a tiny boutique where nobody's running anywhere. Everybody's taking their time, because if our employees take their time with patients, the patients will feel it, and the quality of life of our team is better. Everybody wins.
And people could go on a tour. They could contact you.
They
right?
can come, they can see me and chat with me about science, about anything that I do.
One of the things we recognize is that we want to be heard. We know that somebody cares. We're going to end up with this great story. I was having some problems about a few years ago, and so I go to my doctor. I'm laying on the thing, and he puts his hand on my shoulder. He said, what's going on, Michael? Do you know that instantly I felt better?
Yeah.
It was this instant thing. It's like, oh, I don't know. So let's just run through it. He says, you feeling better? An hour later, you feeling better? Yes. Okay. And then what I realized is I wanted to have some compassion. I once wanted to be able to put this on pause, wasn't quite sure. And it was being demonstrated through this physical anxiety and grief or whatever it happened to be. And so there's a lot of those challenges that are going on with COVID, with the holidays, with time changing. We got all this stuff that's going on, and there's a lot of fog that's out there, not just in the sky, but in our heads. And
COVID
people should,
fog.
yes, and people should feel open enough to share that. And we wish you a lot of good luck, and you do really great work. And my congratulations to you on caring enough, and you're a wonderful human being.
Thank you for having me here.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
And again, so you go to gia.miami, find out more about the doctor and the great team. And we want to thank Andres, who's behind the scenes over there making this happen. Folks, again, this is Live with Miami's Community News. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.